you get to see a diagram I'm going to draw for a second. While reminding you again that throughout history, right up until today, right into your own nervous system, you've had humanity continually being driven to mouth theories that life, theories, ideas, philosophies, systematic attempts at new institutionalized thinking on the basis that life is flawed. I've kicked that and thrown that in your face how many different ways, but you should be able to see that almost everybody that's meeting that's not involved right now, that's meeting somewhere on this planet, that's not involved with bird watching, duck rehabilitation, or library support, almost everybody else is in some way ecological groups, consumer watch groups, political groups, discussion groups, feminist groups, masculine groups, who knows what kind of groups. Almost all of them are meeting on the basis that something about life is flawed. Now all of you know this by now. It's inside the nervous system of civilized intellectual people. This, to distinguish it one more time without it having a name, this has always been on the basis that it's not life that is flawed. And we're not even going to argue the term. It's not life that is flawed, it's the perception that is flawed. And the perception being flawed, again, is not a curse. It's that ordinary perception is flawed in the sense that it's always a day late. It's always a dimension short. It cannot perceive of everything that's going on. And I was going to, one more time, another one came to me, like a little box of consciousness. Because this gets very, very materially close. That ought to give you something to go on if you need anything else again, that this is very opportune. It is pertinent to the very things that I keep trying to point you towards. If you figured ordinary consciousness, and I'm going to take all the inputs of the senses, all of them, including what seems to be the final digestion intellectually of the input of the senses. It is, I'm just using everyday terminology and the perception of everyday intelligence, that man has a good three-dimensional consciousness. And so if you saw it, looked at it in this way, consider you got this little box. You know, I'm drawing it two-dimensionally. You can see my little crude perspective. That three-dimensionally, it is though you are conscious in that way. There is that kind of unused awareness, at least theoretical, that there is a fourth dimension. And sometimes is referred to as time, which is good enough. But what you're faced with the limitations, is then time would be running behind this box, and it's never seen. And it would be seamless, which of course I cannot draw it seamless unless I just wanted to run it off the paper here, and that's still a pretty crude shot. But time is seamless, but looking through the box, things seem to come and go. It seems to move in some way. But then, what I wanted to draw for you, try to get you to perceive in this way, it's like then this whole affair would be a bigger box. That what everyone is missing, but old world, ordinary city intelligence, three-dimensional consciousness, is you're looking through here, and life is what it is. It's what you think it is, it's what everybody else thinks it is, it's what people say it is, it's what people say it not is, it's what people discuss religiously, politically, economically, every daily. It's all of that. In here, it's got height, breadth, depth, and then there is a sensation of time. The people look through here, and there's somebody they see. The next day, they don't see them. They look through here at their own self, and today they say, I think so-and-so. Then tomorrow they don't think it. So there's a sensation of time, but they do not see it as being seamless. They certainly do not. Ordinary consciousness is not a trick. It's not something that people can just decide, well, I'll do that. But they do not see that time and everything else goes around the corner. That there is that all of this is going and coming from somewhere else. There are horizons that are the limits of ordinary intelligence. Yeah. And that things seem to go, things seem to come, and it's all the same. Except when it's seen through here, it seems to have, or it does have the effect of there being episodic intelligence. That things exist now and then they're gone. There's life and there's death. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad. Sometimes I can sing, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I believe I know what's going on, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I look at life and it just represents no fashion of justice. But what is always lacking is that this, right around, just beyond it, it turns around and there's still stuff going on. I didn't draw all this just to be blank. Whatever's going on in here, let's say that's what's going on. You understand, back here it's also going on. It's going on up this way. Parts of it over here coming in and it's going up this way. And of course it's going down there and it's going around this side. That would just be really one more dimension. But except ordinary people do not take into consideration the seamless, constant background of time, and so it's really like you're talking about 5 dimensions, or 2 more. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what. It's not science fiction. It is simply to recognize that, and many of you get this when I'll bring it out, that you'll get a glimpse of it, that if you had some kind of continuing awareness of time, that time was just as much in your unspoken perception, consciousness, intelligence as depth is. That visual depth, the awareness spatially that you're moving around in a universe, in a world, in a life that is 3-dimensional. That stuff has mass, stuff can get in your way, you can push stuff out of your way, stuff can push you out of the way, you can bang into stuff, you can pick it up, you can drop it down, you can pick it up now, you can wait a little while in time and then you can set it down. But if there was an awareness that simply that time was a continuing dimension and had as much effect on things as walking up to this and bumping your leg, or somebody dropping a brick on your foot, or as age finally making you look like sort of a crude satire of what you were 20 years ago, that is as much reality, constant reality, as time, as height, depth, and breadth, you would have a different kind of consciousness. You just have to, you need to be able to face that. Forget what. You simply would not be thinking in the same way. It would affect it. And all I want you to see with this kind of drawing, try to give you something else that intellectually, to put your little neurons on, is it is not unfair for me to draw it this way. Don't worry about what this other dimension, for me to call it 5, don't worry about, you know, how many more, or where is it. It is simply to recognize that there is another one. There's at least one more. Some of you even get glimpses of it. I know you don't tell anybody and you're better off not. But I know some of you get glimpses and it's not spooky. It doesn't require drugs once you can do it. It's let me be poetic rather than mathematical for a minute. It's like the obvious to ordinary consciousness, to the box of consciousness. The obvious, once you have any ability to think in new areas, kind of a new world ability to think. Once you can do that, you do understand that the obvious, the old obvious, doesn't explain anything. But then you recognize that that which you begin to see now that does explain stuff should have been obvious. That is, as opposed to very strange, very science fiction-y, very metaphysical. There is a kind of, there is a regular 3-dimensional scientific attitude that's been expressed. I'm paraphrasing it in some way, I guess, but it says the correct scientific approach toward conceiving of a new theory, looking for a law, looking for some idea that might explain some phenomenon that scientists are observing, that the most scientific approach is to try and find a theory, the most simple, direct theory, that explains, potentially, the subject at hand. I guess that's what you call an obtuse paraphrase. That the best, the most workable, the most scientific theory is the one that most simply explains the phenomenon. Life does not let man outside almost a printed page, outside that proverb, outside that scientific idea itself, hardly lets man use that approach. The reason I dug up that from my poetic obtuseness is that which is obvious ordinarily. Now if you can do it coevally right quick, try with one eye to look at some kind of scientific possibility and then some more metaphorical possibility. That which seems obvious, those who have any chance, those who ever leave old intelligence for a second, you do understand that which was, quote, obvious to everybody else, self-evident, that which everybody knew, you understand doesn't explain anything. I don't care what it was. Laws of science, beliefs and guides, religious ideas, economic theories, political theories, or people just saying, look, you reap what you sow. And let's say that most of the planet at any given time on a good day would go, by God, that's true. Once you begin to get a glimpse across that great flatland ocean to the new world, to some new area, you understand that doesn't explain anything. And it's not making any comment on whatever the reality behind the term is. It doesn't matter. The term could be, nobody reaps what they sow. Doesn't matter. It still explains nothing. Except everybody would say, let's say, assume that most everybody in some given locale would say, that's true. It doesn't explain anything. It may or may not be true. It may or may not be anything. But it doesn't explain anything. And simultaneously, when you get that far, you should recognize, well, that should have been obvious. But you understand how this is getting more and more enriched? It's no longer ice milk. We're getting down to Ben and Jerry's caliber. We're getting down to them putting in, just for no reason, just adding extra butter fat. Because you're talking about serious eating now, that not only is that which is obvious to everybody else, including me, not only does the obvious not explain anything, it should have been obvious that the obvious don't explain anything. And then, once you begin to see what does explain things, is when it should strike you that is the very rule that the scientists say is the best approach. That's the idea, to simply pick out that the most simple, the simplest explanation that would explain this phenomenon is the one to go by. What else have I been doing to you people all this time? Now I know I have to get up here and apparently start, directing an intro into a piece of Wagner. But it ends up after all that and all the distraction and the smoke and the whistles and bring on the Valkyries and bring on the fog and the smoke. It ends up kind of a Von Soupe, a JB, a one chord, a John Lee Hooker. It is the simple explanation, such as life's alive. I mean, if you understand that, you understand everything else. That life's alive. How simple do you want it? Then after that, I can start elaborating on it like, life's alive. I mean everything. I mean everything. I don't mean just theoretically. I mean everything's alive. And not just alive. What I mean by alive is it's growing. It's healthy. Then I start talking historically. Then I start talking psychologically. And a lot of you go, yeah. But you understand the simplest is life's alive. That's it. If you fully understood that, you would understand this. You'd simply understand that life is alive. There's nothing else to be said. That is the... But of course you've got to be able to see that yourself. But that would be in line with that best scientific approach. That is, to pick out the most simple, the simplest idea that will most adequately explain the phenomenon. That's it. Life's alive. 2 words. If you understand it, that is the simplest workable explanation for the phenomenon. All phenomenon. That's it. Now, beyond that, of course, to refine that is then you get into many of the things that I keep talking about, such as under certain mortal conditions, there's nothing to do finally but talk about something. I'm just picking out one that I was recently. Last time we were meeting, I was still discussing that, trying to sketch around that. In your own way, just cutting across the whole spectrum of human behavior, to be able to see that. In instance after instance you'd look at, and if you could recall then, me pointing out what's supposed to be, by city definitions, descriptions, the most scientific approach to a theory, an attempted explanation, then you would see in many instances that, once you see it, is obvious. Except under any ordinary conditions, it's not obvious. What's obvious under other conditions is people arguing, well, was talking necessary here? Not only that, was what they said legitimate? Was what the person said reasonable? Was what the person said truthful? And this goes on and on and on, according to how many people are involved with it, how many people want to comment it. Everybody got some comment, well, wait a minute. They'd have been better off not to even said anything about this. And then somebody else says, either out there or inside one's own nervous system, says, well, I don't know. I'm not sure that you could have remained silent in the face of that kind of occurrence. They all have something to say. And to each person that speaks, to each nervous system, to each molecular bundle that can make a noise inside of the living life, what it says to itself is obvious. Except to someone who can get free of that. They know everything that's obvious to them because that's all you've been listening to all your life. That is the dialogue, repeating the obvious to it over and over and over and over. But then you realize the obvious, that is the obvious to me, up till now, doesn't explain squat. Nothing. Mine doesn't, nobody else's does. And then, when you begin to see what does begin to explain stuff, then you yourself are a new definition of what should be obvious. That is, you see what was simple, such as life's alive. Case closed. If you see it. Or that sometimes talk is the only thing to do. You see it. Or you see that talk is the exchange of energy. And you see in instances that's it. Wherein books, perhaps libraries, are full with discussions that life has driven men to make over the question of validity of talk under this circumstance, under that circumstance, how you should talk this way, why you should talk that way, on and on and on and on and on, and all of them to somebody was obvious. To somebody, each thing that is said about the occurrence, the situation, is self-evident, but it doesn't explain anything. The obvious at that level never explains anything. And then that which does begin to explain things, you look at and you realize that was the simplest explanation and it should have been obvious. But of course it wasn't. All right. Back to more hardwired areas. Another unrecognized law of physics, number whatever, whichever one I'm up to. Everything's partially possible. Now that's not just funny, because none of you knew that, unless you're reading the script before the nights I show up. If you are, I'd like to talk to you. Well, not enough to talk to you, but just a figure of speech. See, now it is obvious to old intelligence that that is just ridiculous. Because there's some things that are not possible. Possible, we're even being a little more subtle than to say true. But there is an unrecognized law of physics that once you begin to see it, then you think, well, I just told you that, my God, that explains so much, it should have been obvious. Everything's partially possible. Now, there are no exceptions, there are no conditions to this. None. Everything. Think of the wildest thing you can. The wildest thing you ever heard about. It's partially possible, or you would have never heard of it. It's partially possible, or no one would have ever been driven to say it. It is partially possible. In the very least, in that it can be verbally talked about. I can update, that may sound more poetic than in the field of science, but the old one about where there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah. Let me take it around the corner. Where there's talk, there's reality. I'm feeling obliged to repeat one more time. This is not some attempted verbal cleverness, because ordinary intelligence does not think this way. It could not think this way, or the dualistic nature of being able to make reasonable, as it's called, for the physically, materially, for the human nervous system, for the brain to operate the way it currently operates, it would break down if it could do such as this. Because there have to be things that are either possible or not possible. And that all things are either possible. They'll fall into one category or the other. This would simply cause some kind of meltdown. It would cause a shut-off. It would cause a malfunction in ordinary brain operations. But this, once you see it, begins to explain many things under certain conditions, wherein you think, my God, that should have been obvious. Everything is partially possible. And it's partially possible at the very least. Not enough of you heard it. I'm not sure I'm going to try to improve upon my first verbal description, but everything is partially possible in that, at the very least, it can be described. Such as someone saying, I believe that there are dead spirits from Atlantis that are visiting us now in unidentified flying weenie mobiles or something. And someone says, well, that's not possible. It's partially possible. I didn't say it was true, and I didn't say it was possible. I didn't say it was correct. I didn't say it was impossible. But anything. How about something even wilder than that? Maybe you imagine that someday you'll be rich and famous. It may be as unlikely, it may be as improbable as poor dead souls from poor vanquished Atlantis coming to visit us now in flying weenie mobiles. And yet, everything, that is, you having a passing dream that I could almost be rich and famous. It is partially possible, or it could not have been thought. And it exists already to the degree to which it was thunk. That's Arkansas past participle tense of thinking. It could not have been thought without it partially existing. Can any of you drag that from my self-proclaimed intro into more poetic fields into a more scientific realm, wherein this is hardwired reality? It's not verbal discussions, it's not theoretical wordplay. Anything is partially possible. if it is your belief, if it is your thought, if it is many people's thought, that such and such is impossible. We cannot have work performed with no expenditure of energy. Impossible in the 3D world. Impossible. I'm not saying that it's possible. I'm not saying they're wrong. I am saying that everything is partially possible. And it is already partially possible insofar as it can be said, such as it's impossible for work to be accomplished without an expenditure of energy. To that degree, it is partially already possible. Or it could not have been said that it's impossible. There is validity, there is life giving in the idea stated, the verbal idea that such and such is impossible. That is a verbal reality within itself. And where there is verbal reality, there's all kinds of reality. Where there are words, there's reality. There's some kind of reality. There is the expenditure of energy. There is the transfer of energy. There is a combustion of energy. There is a conversion of energy just by talking, just by saying there is no such thing as a verbal exchange of energy. Fine. In fact, sir, what you just said is not valid, it is not true, it is not possible. Great. Point proven. You did follow that. If someone stands up and says, well, the idea that words are a living transfer of energy is not true, it is not possible. No sweat to me. This is life's game. To tell me that one of these rules that only I seem to know right now is not possible, hey, break my heart. I won't be able to sleep tonight. Or if they could hear it, about the sarcasm, the little joke sarcasm, would then be say, well, what you just said about anything, no matter how wild or ridiculous or improbable or illogical, that it is partially true just because I said it. That, sir, said they to me or to somebody, is not possible. And I would say, aha, point proven. Game. Next. Of course, they wouldn't hear it. Variation. Not a Wagnerian variation, since I find that to be a five-dimensional oxymoron. Don't anybody from the pro-Wagner Society write me. Go over and fist fight with the pro-Marlowe Society. Right around the corner from everything's partially possible is this: that in the mortal 3D world, nothing is final. Nothing is complete until it is talked about. This is an extension, at least any of you believe that you heard that last time we were taping. You got funny ears. If you heard it, you went around the corner on your own and stop it. Bad boys and girls. But in the 3D world, nothing, no conditions, no exceptions. Nothing is final. Nothing is complete. And I'm saying those two for a reason that may or may not become obvious. Until it is talked about. This is a scientific, it's a law of physics, numbered whatever after the other one. It is not obvious, it's not even possible, it's not true, it's not valid, it's not even sensible to ordinary old line intelligence. But once you begin to see it, and it will begin to explain things, and you will think, geez, that should have been obvious. Let me see if we can't run around it from 4 or 5 different directions. That is, nothing is final, nothing is complete until it's talked about. In the 3D world, talk is what life has done, given to man, if you want to look at it that way, as the everyday attempt to put a period on things. That is one of the valid, unrecognized laws regarding the purpose of talk. It's just in everyday affairs, historically, individually, permanently, transitorially. Talk is the everyday routine attempt by everyday routine people, as run and motivated by life, to put the period, which of course I point out to you, there is no such thing. Not possible. But it is the attempt to put a period on things. Such as, at times once you begin to see this obvious, explanatory phenomenon that at times only talk will do, that the only thing possible is talk. And at times, the attempt to put a period on something is you finally tell someone, I love you, I hate you, you disappoint me, God, you're a lot of trouble, I know what you've done to me now, I never want to talk to you again. Whatever it is the final. Now final, remember in the 3D world, is a laugh, because you may do it again tomorrow. Time is simply daily. It's a daily manifestation to old intelligence. But it is apparently the final, and it may do you, if you're an ordinary person, to finally tell the person, hey, let's quit being around the bush, even being around the Reagan, but let's stop this. I'm going to tell you, I know what you did to me back in 1968. I've known the details. I've been harboring it. It's been eating at me. I want to tell you, there's nothing you can do to ever rehabilitate our relationship. I'd never trust you. I just might as well admit it. I don't like you. I don't trust you. I just don't want to talk to you again. Now that may be the end of it. That may, from an ordinary view, whoever part I was playing, that may apparently put a period on it for that person and they walk off. I just picked that one. It could be that finally you have to tell somebody, I know how I act, and blah, 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 blah. And I don't guess I ever told you, but I just want to tell you, I love you. Whether it's to a lover, it's your mother that you never told her, you hadn't told her in 30 years, or it's to the guy that fixed your air conditioning. Talk is continually serving an everyday attempt to put a period on something, on things, but on a particular something. Let me slide around some of the real common ones. Religion has always been, amongst other purposes it serves, is men being given by life, this thing called religion, but then as men finally talking into words about their deep fears, their personal guilts and suffering, and their high hopes, which I guess about covers it. But there are ways that life, in its multiplicity of its many voices, internally has some parts of itself make fun of religion, criticize religion, can make jokes about confessing, especially if you're a non-Catholic, I guess, to the ritual of going to another human, a guy that supposedly only has sex with nobody, that wears a dress, and you sit and you tell somebody, you confess your sins outside the religion. That is certainly good in parts of life's body, or else you wouldn't be sniggering, and some of you may be Catholic, because they can snigger too, but parts of life's body is doing this, and then other parts of life's body, especially once it's pointed out, other parts of life's body goes, but it is an attempt, confession is just one of the ritualistic aspects. Religion in general is true with this from one view. But I was going to narrow it down there for a second. Confession is an attempt to finally close up some subject, verbally. But rather than just talking to yourself, this seems to have the aura, if not the promise, of a more complex implication. That by talking to this priest, you are in fact, at least second-handedly, we're assuming, if you're Catholic, that in some way he's going to pass it along to God, or he's been franchised by God to say, oh, okay, that's all right. But the point is, not that just seems, that's sort of like chopped nuts on top of the sundae, I guess, because what's really going on is the finality of the person putting into words, assuming the confessional works. It doesn't always work by any means. But that the person does it and they feel better, or they seem to do it and the priest says, that's not so bad, don't worry about it. Now, assuming that you walk out and you feel better. It was not the priest. It was not being there in the church. All that's connected, of course. But if you think that explains anything, then you are terminally locked in to old-time intelligence, and it doesn't really explain anything, because I am telling you up into new areas of the intellect itself, into the brain, into the higher ends of the nervous system and the verbal parts. This is what is going on. This is what has always been going on, whether it be in the Catholic Church, whether it be in some unknown religion. It happens amongst friends. It, of course, happens in our day and time, if you want a slight sidestep, in talking analysis. Classical Freudian analysis and other forms of it nowadays, but all forms of talking analysis, wherein the patient talks. And the psychiatrist, the clinical psychologist, listens. Whether they are making comments or not, the main thrust of this system seems to be that you, the patient, come in and you try to put into words. And classically, I say classically, for 60 or 70 years now in the Western world, Freudian psychology using that as the template right now, that the talk in some way is you trying to conjure back up, to bring back up, to try and recall past traumas that if you in some way can bring them up will sort of explain things, sort of explain you, why you are like you are. Now there are parts of life's body that makes a lot of fun at analysis. Sitting ducks for comedians always have been. Right after probably airline food is a laugh about psychiatrists and psychiatry in general. But all of you surely do know that there are parts of life's body, thousands, hundreds of thousands, surely, but now people who have been through talking analysis that would tell you that they're ready to fight if you're going to laugh at it. That will tell you that they have benefited in a way that the church didn't offer, alcohol, etc. That, in other words, they are in favor of it and it works. Now, what happened to those people? You want me to tell you? I've already told you, but I'll tell you. They verbally finalized something. A something to them. But it was not a conjuring up of some childhood trauma, because we're into an area, if any of you want to get real precise here for a second, most of you don't have to have any professional knowledge, all of you should know this. The kind of breakthroughs that satisfied patients of talking analysis describe, it's not simply that they have been going for X number of months or years and trying to talk, and the psychiatrist just sitting there, and the person babbling on about their childhood. One day they go suddenly, oh, well, let's say for years they've been saying about how frightened they are of the opposite sex, women. Let's say it's a male patient. And they talk about, off and on, for months or years, about the problems they had with their mother. The way their mother mistreated them, the way their mother let them down, the way they mistreated their mother, the way they let their mother down. They talk and they talk. And then one day after months or years, it's not simply this, that the patient goes, oh wait, now I remember. Now I remember. It was September the 12th, 1952. I was 9 years old. I came home early from school, and my mother was standing in the bathroom nude with a Q-tip in her ear, and she did this, and then blew her nose, and I had never seen my mother nude and behaving in such a crude manner. And now it all makes sense. I will assume that you people know that patients who would say that they have benefited specifically from talking analysis, it is not quite that simple. It's not quite that dramatic. It's on the basis of this. They've been saying the same thing over and over and over for months, for years. But when it seems to work, it's like one day they said it, and it was like finally it was a period. It was almost as though repetition had become the final exorcism. Now, that sounds too psychological. I'm just trying to get you to look. Don't stop there. It's none of that. It's not really what their mother did to them. It's not really the repetition, but what I want you to see is it was not the quality of what they were talking about. It wasn't that there was some verbal, per se, secret, some suppressed trauma or occurrence that happened. It could have been the same thing they had been saying every session for years. But one day it's like they said it and went, phew, and maybe told the psychiatrist, you know what? I don't know what's happened. I guess it's been a gradual process, but not only do I no longer feel a certain kind of hostility toward my mother, which I guess was maybe a secondary problem of mine, but the fear I've had of women, I don't know, it's just kind of slipped up. I'm going to tell you what, I don't anymore. That's weird, isn't it? The psychiatrist may say, well, my God, that sounds good to me. And he say, well, I'll see you Tuesday again. The guy might say, I don't know. You know, I'll call you. I mean, finally shake his hand, he may say, I don't know if I'll be back or not. Something's happened. You know, you did it. God damn it, thanks a lot, Doc. You know, I don't know. Don't count on me. I'll call and let you know if I won't come back. And the guy leaves. And later, if he's asked about it, he's the kind of guy to say, analysis, it's slow, it's painful, you know, who knows how it works, but by God, for years I was afraid of women. And I am no longer afraid of women. I'm telling you a fact. Of course, he didn't take into consideration he was in analysis 15 years, his hormones have run down, all kinds of stuff. I don't mean that that's the answer. I don't mean that that's the answer. What I'm trying to get you to consider tonight is, verbally, the person finally completed it. Verbally. And the contents of the verbalization, the contents or the reference point, that is my mother, fear of the opposite sex, that is all, I'm not to say it, irrelevant. But verbally, the analysis, the process of analysis of a person talking, of a person going somewhere and having a paid silent ear for 50 minutes, for 17 years, they finally, in some area, when it works, apparently, they verbally put a period on something. And they go, phew, we got to turn the tape. Well, I'm here at this point talking about analysis. The guy says, this is pregnantly pertinent. You can take it as an aside tonight, but I may not ever come back to this particular point. Somebody in analysis, now take analysis as being a widespread. If you need the hard physical aspect, then stay with that, of an actual patient in analysis, pursuing talking analysis, which is fine. Then you can expand it, if you can do so, into you talking to yourself, to your part, apparently, of this continuing dialogue in the nervous system. Either way is fine. There's nothing wrong with the former. I'll use that as the springboard still. A person is in analysis, and it seems to be the core of their problem, let's say, as far as they're concerned, is I was so frightened as a child. I was so frightened back then. I was so shy back then. And let's say that for 17 years, just continually, however long, the patient, in almost every session, just stays with that. And of course they do, the psychiatrist, if you don't know this, the psychiatrist will assume, accept as that as being self-evidently important to the person. The psychiatrist, the way life is trained and put out the information in that institution, the psychiatrist, if you ask him or her, might say, well, that is the apparent problem that the person can verbalize to me. It probably has underlying unconscious roots, but we'll have to wait and see. But the psychiatrist will go along that if the person consistently says, well, the reason I'm here, and what I was thinking about since our last session is still how frightened I was as a child. Analysis, when people talk, if they just do it to themselves, the way things are wired up for the dialogue running through life's body itself and running through the individual bodies, it seems to be an attempt at analysis at you, but it's always on the basis, generally, of how I was. That is, that even though I may be suffering now, I wouldn't be seeking treatment. It's on the basis that I was, back then as a child, frightened. I was scared growing up. And I was real shy. And it's arranged in such a way, get prepared if I got to warn you that this is subtle, but I can smell the subtleness coming up. At least from your view, not mine. For me it's self-evident, but that's another story. It is that they're talking about the past. In fact, that is, as you should know, the basis of Western psychology, psychiatry, analysis, that the past is the cause of whatever your current problem is. If you're real shy, something in the past caused it. And so people talk that way, not because of psychiatry, because of life. Life believes that because of, psychiatry believes that because of life. Not that psychiatry calls it, but people talk and people think without any analyzation of my problem is in the past. I mean, it's got some manifestation now, or I wouldn't be seeking relief. But they continue to say and to think in such a way that I was so shy back then. I was so frightened as a child. But that is not what is actually being said, and they don't realize it. They're still saying without knowing it, and there is a subtle but important distinction. They are saying also that I am frightened now. But that's not the way it comes out. And if you indeed ask them, general everyday people, they would say, nah, well, I guess I maybe get frightened now as well as other people, but what I'm talking about is something serious. What I'm talking about is my memory of the number of the nights, the many nights, just as a little 7 or 8 year old nipper, that I used to hover in my room and I would shiver, and I was afraid of every little noise, and I'd try to get my parents to comfort me, and they'd say, don't worry about it, you're too nervous. And I was just so frightened. You don't know what that's done to me. Their feeling would be that this in some way, once it was asked them directly, that this is in some way separate. I mean, it has its effect right now, but the problem is back there. That I am literally correct when I say I was so frightened back then. I was so frightened as a child. That's what I'm trying to talk about. That's why I'm here with an analyst. If you'll leave me alone, that's why I'm trying to talk to him, because he and I both know that's it. I mean, it's back there somewhere. We just got to dig it out. No, the distinction that's not recognized. You're not frightened back then. You may have been, but that's not it. You're frightened now. I was so shy as a child. No. You're so shy now. Oh yeah, I guess I'm a little shy. I wouldn't be here, but that's not the problem. I can deal with it now. You don't know how shy I was. You don't know me thinking about how shy I was. The humiliation. Hey, you got a minute? I got stories about how my mother used to take me and push me out at piano recitals. Her teachers would say, Siegfried, you're way too shy. I want you to get up and I want you to play the hippopotamus's rump in our next play. And I'd go, no, I can't. And I was so shy, I couldn't even tell her no. And I'd almost spoil my little knickers. And so the person is saying, well, now I may still, there's some ramifications of that, but the shyness, the shyness that I'm really talking about is back there. Do any of you catch this distinction for a second? And it's not back there. You were not frightened back then. You were not shy back then. It's now. This is right at the heart of even the wall of the 4D, back behind this 3D box of consciousness of time, because this distinction is based upon, where I've drugged this aside, where I'm trying to get you to, is based upon this. It's not recognized that the mortal, ordinary concept of time is the Let me put it to you another way. Ordinary talk is the real, dreamed of time machine. It is the, even though you didn't recognize that life needed this or that you used it, it is an unrecognized, necessary time condenser. Talk. Now, any of you already chuckling that probably got some neurons trying to get around the corner, don't listen to them if they say, well, wait a minute. It's really memory is the ultimate time machine. That's true enough. But I'm trying to drag you into new fertile fields. It's not memory, it's talk. It's the time machine. You wouldn't even have any memory were it not for talk. But it is talk. You can forget all the Hollywood movies and H.G. Wells' imagination and dreamed of flying chairs and electricity whizzing through people's hair and ears and personal belongings. The time machine is talk. As long as you can talk about something, it can exist without any temporal, permanent reference point. Wherein people, quite ordinary, quite sane, quite educated people, would say, I was unbelievably, almost debilitatingly shy as a child. And if you tried to say, well, wait, so you're saying that's a problem? Well, yes, I consider it a problem. In fact, I've been in analysis for a while. All right. But you're saying that you being painfully, how'd you put it, almost debilitatingly? Yes. Shy was probably your childhood trauma. Or it has been one of the crippling aspects of your life, and it's a yes. But you're saying it's not now, it's then. Well, it has its implications now, but it was then. And you tried to tell them it was not then. It's as much now as it was then. That's not true. Not looking through this 3D box of consciousness, because then they can shift the box over in their mind. If we're going to use 2D, we'll consider over here seems to them to be the past. This seems to be the present. And over there, of course, seems to be the future on that basis. It's like they can shift their box in here, that is their memory, back and say, well, no, now I'm grown. I'm not telling you that it doesn't affect me, some of the terrible things that happened to me. But no, the problem, that is my shyness, it's a different thing now. It's not, the way I experience it now, the way I feel about it, the way I think about it, is not the problem that it was. And there's no way to tell them, there's no way for you to tell yourself that, oh yes, it's just the same. It is only through talk that you can move in time, and it seems to be episodic, and you lose all sense of time. That is, you lose sense that it is seamless, and I am now not suffering over childhood traumas of being so shy. It's not then. It's got nothing to do with then. Well, except for the fact that then is now. But it is time that turns what seems to be one's life into a time machine. It is talk that turns it into a time machine. It is talk that will condense and when necessary expand, and it makes things apparently fit into this box wherein you and your own dialogue and you and other people can discuss it reasonably, that they agree with you. Life makes the rest of its own body agree with you. There's only a few people around that do not agree to that. And it's not that we few disagree, it's that just have to point out that it's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing with this, because if you agree or you don't agree, it doesn't explain anything. There is another dimension. But right in front of everybody is a dimension that is manipulated by talk, and that is what seems to be time. And that people confuse, except they don't see it as confusion. I don't mean people who believe they're disoriented, but people talk about the future as being something separate from now. They especially talk about now as being separate from something that happened. It's not. It is talk that makes it apparently possible intellectually, forget any other way, that makes it possible to believe that the past was something that already happened, and although it may have some kind of ramifications to what's going on now, it's not the same. And it's exactly the same. How can someone suffer in the past? It sounds fine intellectually to say, well, now I'm not as shy as I was. But I'm not saying that my shyness as a child, due to my mother's overbearing nature, I'm not saying that it does not affect me now, but it's not the same thing. Now it sounds reasonable. It sounds almost incontrovertible. But now let me ask you, since the nervous system is just another function of the human organism, let me ask you this. You broke your little toe when you were 7 years old. And as much as they can't really splint up little toes, let's assume they kept you off of it, and it grew right back and you can't tell the difference. Are you still suffering in some way over that? Because a broken toe hurts. Are you still suffering over it? And the answer is no. You're being silly. That stopped. So, why is not the other silly? Well, you don't know what my mother did to me. You don't know how they laughed and ridiculed me and made fun of me in comparison to my older brother. Made me so shy and withdrawn. Oh, I got over some of it, but damn, I'm still suffering from it. It costing me a small fortune. And analyst's fees. Do you hear that there is no difference? Now there is to ordinary intelligence. That is part of the churning process. That is the part of the transfer of energy. It is part of the responsibility of talk to create this intellectual time machine. It condenses, it expands, it chops up, it manipulates time to where there is no other. I said H.G. Wells, I don't keep up with science fiction. I don't care what the greatest, most scientific, up-to-date notion somewhere in science fiction of time machines, they're silly putty compared to talk. Anybody's talk. Anybody's. A septic tank cleaner outer with a third-grade education's talk is a greater time machine than anybody can conjure up in fiction or in semi-fiction. It's right there with you all the time. It's dazzling in its splendor, and it is dazzling and distracting in its simplicity. That is, things happen in the past, right? And then they may have some implication in the future, but you know, things that have happened, and there's little you can do about it. To tell somebody that you're living in a time machine, for you to even talk about the past, for you to say that there may be an implication, or for you withal to say, well, yeah, such and such happened to me as a child, but it don't affect me whatsoever. you are living, take your choice, in a dream, a fool's paradise, an unrecognized time machine. Back on the mainer, if there was such a word, path, about the everyday attempted verbal finality as being the try to put a period. Besides religion, analysis, talking to people ordinarily, making proclamations of your feelings and what you think. How about the good old one that all of you like to hear about? To talk about yourself is a kind of personal, ultimate attempt to finalize, if not complete, yourself. Now, you people have seen this on tape and other times and other places. If you're going to get anywhere, you've got to make that great quantum leap, at least a small little jump, away from what seems to be the obvious psychological implications of what I just said. If there are some, it's an accident, all right? Because if you're going to stay at that level, then you'd say, well, wait a minute, all you're saying is that people try to continually... I sure do play the part of ordinary intelligence and consciousness good, don't I? Well, thank you. I can speak for religion and psychology. I can do it so well. I wonder how. Well, let's don't go into that, all right? Suits me not to, all right. If we were using ordinary psychological views, we could say to me, well, all you're saying is that people attempt to continually define themselves, to reinforce their dreams, to try and shore up what talents and abilities they may have. That's understandable. If it doesn't get too far afield from the reality of what they are, then it will not cause neuroses. It's the way people are. People want to say, well, people want to tell you what kind of guy they are. That's life. How true. If you are indeed going to be a real explorer, before marriage, previously known as a real revolutionist, that was the maiden name of all of you people. But if you're going to be a real explorer, you in a sense have got to move against this. Not for any sort of romantic, religious, or psychological reason. But you've got to move against that kind of mechanical talk of trying to finalize yourself by talking about yourself, because what you are then doing is thus trying to leave things, in this case you, open-ended. Wherein, if we were talking psychologically, you could say that other people, based upon what I was telling you was that other scientific unrecognized law of physics, that through talk people attempt to finalize, to complete things. In a necessary way, life needs it. But to attempt to do that with yourself, if you're ordinary, life needs that. That is not funny. No need to be sarcastic. There's nothing wrong with people continually out in life to do it. Once you begin to see it, you might see it as being silly, or you might have to see it first as being cute and work your way up, of course. But to see presidents, prime ministers, to see tyrants that have got a whole country's army under their command, that they have taken charge, they have squashed a half a dozen attempted counter coups. They're in control of a whole country. They're the richest person there, and they get them on camera. And what do the poor slobs do? They won't tell you what kind of guy they are. And you think, well, from one view, if you were part of life's body from this somewhere else, you could think, Jesus, you know, how come you keep having to say that you've arrived? Why do you have to keep telling us what kind of guy that you're in charge? And it strikes many people as suspect other people who continually have to say, wait a minute, I don't want any of you people to take me for a fool. You know. I know what some of you think. Now, I want you to know I ain't no idiot. Now, sometimes I get carried away perhaps in my English. I didn't major in English. But I want to tell you people, now I got a master's degree at such and such, and the preface of my last book was written by Dr. So-and-so, and I want you people to understand, you know, I'm not some idiot. Now many people, when they hear that from a guy who may have a book, who may have degrees, to hear a guy saying, look, I'm not the big fool you think I am. There are many parts of life's body, that is people, that when they hear that, they think, you know, I smell something's not right. When does a guy have to tell you that he's no fool? Or that he's especially not the fool that you think he is, and you'd never take the thought until he said that. All of that, from an ordinary view, you would think is perhaps what I was pointing towards. That it is simply people attempting to reinforce, to try and solidify a good self-image, which is fine in the city. There's nothing wrong with that. But they are, in fact, has moved my life, they're attempting, if not to complete themselves. That's why I told you I was using two words, but I won't get into it tonight, but you can consider it yourself. It's the attempt to finalize, if not complete things, and in this case, oneself. If it's not really a completion, that is, of whatever dreams, whatever seems to be the unsoldered, the unfulfilled potentials in you, it would then at least seem that ordinary people are being driven to verbally at least finalize it in such ways as, well, maybe I'm not perfect. I never did finish school, and I know I have certain shortcomings, but I think, tell you the truth, I think I've done pretty good. I mean, here I am, I'm blank years old, and I've got almost $800,000 in the bank. The business, I put on 20 new employees. My kids are doing pretty good. They think a lot of me. So in other words, people, this is very common, that they do not verbally even say that they have completed themselves. But it's as though they have finalized, that they have put a period, that they have said, well, I don't guess I'm going to be perfect in this life, but I think I've done pretty darn good. It's the attempt to put a period like, well, I give up. Now this is as good as I'm going to get, but it ain't bad. To be a real explorer, you can't even fool with that. Why would you want to do that? Why would you believe that you're involved with something that, in any way out of the ordinary, such as this, if it's still out of the ordinary, by finally concluding, well, maybe I won't finally, I always wanted to get to Rome, but my God, here I am, I'm in Venice, what the hell? That's pretty good. I mean, insofar as, you know, I started out in Secaucus, so I made it to Venice, so what the hey? How can you call yourself an explorer? Why would you want to do that? You would have had to have lost all understanding. You would have to have lost all four-dimensional memory of what you've gotten out of this. I shouldn't have to push this any further. You just must be able to see that, in fact, a real explorer would attempt to go against this every day, drive to finalize yourself, to sort of throw in the towel, but you got to do it verbally. You can't just do it. No matter how educated or uneducated, you've got to verbally give up. You've got to verbally make this attempt. You may have to do it over and over and over, and you may die before it works if you're ordinary, but you've got to continue to try and put this period like, well, Jesus, I've been trying to lose weight all my life. I've been on 100 diets. And you go on and you talk for an hour to somebody telling this. You say, well, here I am, you know, Jesus, I'm 48 years old, And I've already read enough to know that physiologically, no matter what you do, your weight starts dropping down to your damned old hips, and you start putting on love handles no matter what you do. And, you know, I've done my best. And I don't weigh as much as I probably would have. I don't weigh as much as my father did when he was my age, and blah, blah, blah. And what you're attempting to do continually is to finalize, to put some kind of period on something that seems to be of importance to you. Why? How could you believe that a real explorer, how could you believe that anybody trying to be intelligent in a way not normally available would accept that, would tolerate it? At the very least, a verbal detailing of this would be to say, as I keep hinting and threatening and trying to trick you, is don't tell people what kind of guy you are. Don't tell you what kind of guy you are. The dialogue will try to tell you, and I've already given you enough hints about who the other voice is. It's life. It's not your past, it's not your childhood, it's not your unconscious mind, it's not your subconscious mind, it's not your semi-pro mind. It's life passing itself off as always, giving you a first story, hollering, "Hey, look over there!" Don't, even to yourself, tell you what kind of guy you are. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. It's just irrelevant. It's just don't do it. Because it is the attempt. It is life, not you. It's life making this small time. Now I say small time, it's obviously not a full time, or it would succeed anytime it wanted to. But it's a small time, spasmodic, periodic, varying from place to place in the living life of body of life, of it trying to put some finality here and there on people saying, well, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I ain't perfect, but I've done a darn good job, and I'm pretty well satisfied with what I've done with my life. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it has any validity. It doesn't matter whether it's true or false, correct or up and down, or green or purple. It is the attempt to put a period on something. And you should, in fact, be trying to keep the whole process open-ended. I ain't going to tell you what kind of guy I am, because I ain't no kind of guy. Of course, you wouldn't even say that. I'm saying the kind of things that you shouldn't say. Well, I'm not going to tell you what kind of guy I am, because I don't know yet what kind of guy I am. I ain't gotten there yet. Of course, you shouldn't say that. I'm doing this for you, so that you don't have to do it. You shouldn't even do that. But if you're going to attempt to keep it open-ended where you can possibly get out of town, that you can get past Venice, that you can get to some new area in your own nervous system, in your own brain, wherein you have never been, you can't stop and say, well, all right, I am not the same person I was when I started this. I don't think the same way. I am not the same person. I may look not that dissimilar to what I was, but I am not the same person. That's the kind of guy I am, but now I'm going to stick with it as best I can, as long as he's still around, the skill's on. I'm going to stick with it, because that's the kind of guy I am. Don't do that. I never told you what kind of guy I am, assuming that, if we're going to think that some of this, that you're getting it from me, you'd think, well, perhaps the source has some significance. I never told you what kind of guy I am. Why should you tell you what kind of guy you are? Don't tell me what kind of guy you are. Why should you tell you what kind of guy you are? Why? It's the attempt to put some finality, if not completeness, which would almost open up a small possibility, but surely I gave you enough verbal examples to see that that's not what even ordinarily takes place. It's the attempt to put some kind of finality. Well, all right, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I'm probably the kind of guy that won't die a millionaire, I won't die famous, and I will not probably have overcome all of my bad habits and shortcomings. But I'm going to tell you what, I've had a decent heart. I've been kind to most people that'll let me. I have done the best I can, and I don't have any apologies to make to anybody. Well, that person might as well, insofar as this kind of stuff, go ahead and lay down and ask for somebody to put a lily in your hand, because you're done for. You may end up and be elected Pope after that, or Prime Minister. But you're not going anywhere else, if indeed it takes. If you can go blah, 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 and go, I'm cured, Doc, I'm cured, I feel much better. That is the kind of guy I am. Ha, thanks a lot. That's it. It is a variation on myself when your own nervous system can apparently accept that from your dialogue. And it has to come from you, notice, when this works. Like when analysis seems to take it, is not a psychiatrist. Nobody's ever said this. It's not that a happy ex-patient of talking analysis says, well, I went for years and years and years and years and years and years, and the psychiatrist never really did much of anything. And then one day he said, you know what I think? I think that from listening to you now for the last 17 years, I believe that something, out of all the stuff you told me, that somewhere your mother, something happened and it's frightened you so much that you have been, I don't know, shy, frightened of women since then. And the person go, oh my God, that's it, say it again. It never comes apparently from out there. No matter what the source would be, it's like it was some kind of internal awakening, some kind of enlightenment, your own intellectual epiphany, that, But then it becomes like that kind of finality to ordinary intelligence is the ultimate, the super ultimate. It's hard to do variation of yourself when you've already started off at the highest level. That kind of finality becomes the super ultimate exorcism. It's like you have done away with all demons. In this case, all demons being your own doubt, being your own incompleteness. That years ago I used to want to be real smart. I wanted to figure out how life worked. And I went around, I took drugs, and I read books. But geez, here I am, 48, and I'm a little overweight, and my wife left me. And half the time I'm impotent nowadays, and I've been drinking too much. And here you are, sir, trying to sell me a book on mysticism. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'll tell you the kind of guy I am nowadays. There may have been something to that in the past. But I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I ain't got time for it to worry about it anymore. I'm just telling you, that's the kind of guy I am. That, you understand, I don't mean it religiously, that is like the super ultimate exorcism. That is, hey, I don't care. I'm in the death queue like everybody else. There ain't no way out. Doesn't matter how smart you are, you're going to die anyway. Fuck it all. That is like the final exorcism, whether it's done in a religious context or in analysis, or whether it's just a guy finally saying, well, I tell you the kind of guy I am, I don't care anymore. Case of rock. But it's got to be said. Always remember that. You cannot non-verbally go. You cannot non-verbally go. You got to entertain the dialogue, at least, if you don't ever do it to somebody else, to yourself. You got to finally say, I ain't going nowhere. I probably was never going nowhere. I'm so old now it doesn't matter. There's nothing going to change. To hell with it. I just ain't going to worry about it anymore. I ain't going to try to, I'm not going to watch my diet. Fuck all this cholesterol and what drinking will do to you. Just never mind it. You have at least have got to entertain that dialogue in you, but that kind of finality. That's not a completeness, it's just like, all right, resignation. But in a sense, that is the ultimate three-dimensional exorcism. That is the ultimate salvation. Because just trying to be a good Christian or a Muslim or something, in the ordinary context, always leaves some room for doubt. But you keep wanting to ask the priest, are you sure when I die that I'm actually going to not die? Yeah, trust me. How about you? Same with me, I won't really be dead. There's some room for doubt. There's some room for doubt that you're not actually sure that salvation is going to be my reward for entertaining this philosophy and attending these meetings of this church. But from another view, the ultimate salvation is to be able to finalize verbally something. In this case, you, an ordinary person, that, hey, I am what I am, nothing's going to change, to hell with it, I'm about to die, and nothing means much to me anymore, so who cares? That is almost the ultimate salvation. But it has to be done in words. It has to be. There's no way that you can resign. There is no way that you can give up. There is no way that you can apparently finalize to any degree anything in you without words. Because there is nothing at the nonverbal level in the human nervous system loop that needs salvation, that needs exorcism. Were it not for the part of your nervous system that talks, now you surely know this by now. Religion, if there were some other people that did talk, a few of them, religion would last as long as the Edsel did. Because everything that religion, everything that analysis, now if you're going to get me going, everything that they've got in shopping malls, everything that you can order by mail, from Macy's, from Sears, all of that, irrelevant doesn't cover it, but that should give you some suggestion. If we, again, could arbitrarily divide to cut off the human nervous system, and here you still are, and we're in some way aware that you could take in sensually the information, but that you really personally were no longer operating at the verbal level, then anything at the secondary level in life, all the human institutions, all the human cares, fears, and all of that would be, understated, but would be irrelevant. You would need no salvation, you would need no relief from fear, because you would have none. Not here. And any other fear you had below the verbal level would have to be imminent. And then that level would know what to do. But up here, it's only here that, hey, I need help. I need help from my nightmares, I need help from my dreams, I need interpretation for my experience, because some of it is disquieting. That is all secondary level activities. They're all secondary concerns, and secondary concerns have got to be supported by what? T-A-L-K. Secondary has got to be supported. Secondary activities, secondary interests cannot exist without the support, without the breath of talk, wherein primary activities, primary needs are otherwise. But of course we cannot go backwards. This is not about in some way going backwards to where you do not have any primary interest, because you can't. And if you could, I wouldn't be in party to it. That's not what this is. But you need to see that the opposite of what seems to be obvious is not necessarily obvious. It's never that simple. Well, it's that simple in 3D world. That's why the 3D world is populated by simpletons. We can only trust that as they come by for their daily census, that periodically you can refrain, if not from being home, from at least answering the damn door. And if you do answer the door and you see them there with a clipboard, do not tell them the kind of guy you are. Just don't. If they ask how many people are in your family, tell them how many toilets you have. If they want to know what your income is, tell them how many pets you have. But just do not tell them the kind of guy you are. I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. I'm the kind of guy that's got 5 minutes left on the tape. In conclusion, if you would turn to page number 17 in your hymnals, if you're over here in your hymnals, I was going to offer tonight another one in my continuing illusionary, impossible, possible names, that if we were ever going to name this. And I was going to give you the thought for the day. But how about this? An intellectual BLT. How about I'll give you a combination. It's going to be an unusable but possible name for this, if we're ever going to name it, and simultaneously the thought for the day. They're both the same. You got me? I'm going to make them together. So this is a possible name, which of course couldn't be, but it's a possible name for this, if we were ever going to name it, and it's also the thought for the day. Both the same. Are you ready? It goes like this. To wit. Hey, can't you take a joke?